This year marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and African nations, a friendship that has achieved leapfrog development for the continent. Policies under the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Framework and the Belt and Road Initiative have encouraged more Chinese enterprises to invest in African projects, leading to landmark buildings, factories, and flourishing infrastructure. Some of the flagship projects include the Kenya Standard Gauge Railway, connecting the capital Nairobi with the port city of Mombasa. The SGR has cut journey times for commuters from 10 hours to 5. Since opening in 2017, the railway has transported some 16 million passengers and 40 million tons of cargo, according to official data. The Chinese-built Maputo-Katembe Bridge in Mozambique is Africa's longest suspension bridge, connecting the capital Maputo with its suburb of Katembe. Before, the only way across the Maputo Bay, a 90-kilometer inlet of the Indian Ocean, was by ferry. After its completion in 2018, officials say the province has witnessed a tourism boom due to easier access to major resorts. In January this year, Angolan President João Lourenço inaugurated an aluminium plant to boost industrialization and diversify an economy that's reliant on oil and gas. The project, in partnership with a Chinese firm, is expected to produce 120 tons of electrolytic aluminium annually and create 1,200 jobs in just the first phase. China's cooperation with African countries isn't just limited to infrastructure projects. Over the decades, Chinese medical teams have been bringing free services to populations across the continent and providing extra training for local healthcare professionals. With advanced medical equipment, the Chinese teams provide services across various specialties, including internal medicine, surgery, and traditional Chinese medicine. Cameroon, Ghana, Comoros, Rwanda, and Tanzania are some of the countries with a health cooperation with China. China is also constructing modern stadiums to boost local talent and provide state-of-the-art facilities for international competition. In Kenya, the Talanta Sports Stadium is nearing completion. It will have a 60,000-seat capacity and will be used to host the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations. Other Chinese-built stadiums that have been a source of pride and entertainment include the Marshal Idriss Déby Itno Stadium in Chad and the Alassane Ouattara Olympic Stadium in Côte d'Ivoire. In recent years, China has shifted its investment focus towards Africa's green transition. Key investments include major hydroelectric dams in Ethiopia and Rwanda and large-scale solar parks in Kenya and South Africa, investments that have ensured clean energy supply to households while addressing electricity shortages and blackouts. Chinese investment in Africa are vast and numerous, supported by strategic long-term partnerships. And with the ties growing stronger, development and improved livelihoods for people is secured. Caroline B., CGTN.
All right, let's broaden this discussion further. I am joined in the studio by Victor Muyakane, an anchor and reporter at the Kenyan-based TV47, as well as Kavins Adere, a China-Africa expert. Let's start with you, Victor. Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us here on the program. Well, first of all, what has been your experience covering poverty alleviation in Africa? And most importantly, what role has China played in poverty relief on the continent? What can you share?
Thank you for having me, Richard. What I've seen covering Kenya and the continent is that there's one central lesson, and that is poverty in Africa is rarely about a lack of ambition or anything like that. It's almost always a lack of access to resources, to capital, to markets, to infrastructure. And when we look at that sort of situation, you see scenarios like, for instance, when roads get better, farmers earn more. When the electricity or the power gets to these rural communities, then micro enterprises grow and multiply. When there's connectivity, then opportunities follow. Now, it's at this level of infrastructure that China is most visible. The engagement with China is most visible. We've seen roads, ports and railways. And for instance, the SGR in Kenya has significantly cut travel time and improved efficiency, and that's good for trade. But to be fair, infrastructure is just stage one. It's not the only thing. But if I were to summarize it in one sentence, I'd say without infrastructure, I mean, poverty, eradication and elimination is really, really difficult. And this is where China really comes in strong in engagement with Africa, because it's this foundational layer of infrastructure that we see the most impact.
All right. Victor, stay with us. We have another question for you, but let's get Mr. Adere into this discussion. Mr. Adere, if you can hear me, welcome to the program as well. From your perspective, Mr. Adere, how has Africa dealt with poverty relief to improve livelihoods? And have they borrowed anything from what China has done? How do you see it?
So thank you so much for having me. Certainly, different African countries have tried different approaches to ensure that they lift their populations out of poverty. As you know, poverty is the major single important issue when it comes to Africa's economic transformation. So look at countries like Kenya with their initiatives to lift people out of poverty, with the cash transfers to the most vulnerable, tapping into the international development. Countries like Ethiopia and Rwanda with their focus on smallholder farming, and also industrialization in terms of the aggregated industrial parks where they can provide employment to the young people and certainly society's most vulnerable. Of course, every country in Africa is trying to do something on its own strategy, but overall, you also look at the Africa as a whole. Under the Africa Agenda 2063 by the African Union, the continent hopes to transform its economic status by promoting equity as well as economic well-being of the citizens. Certainly in these efforts, one partner that stands out is China. As you know, China today is Africa's largest development partner, trade partner, for example, 16 years in a row. And China has been very forthcoming in terms of sharing the proceeds of its own development with Africa. Whether you talk about infrastructure development, capacity building for Africa's people, opening its market for African produce, there's just so many ways. But more importantly is the narrative that China has managed to lift over 800 million people out of poverty in just 4 decades. This is something that African countries take seriously and look at it as an inspiration. So African countries believe they can also do the same. If China did that, why not Africa with all its resources and international partnerships?
Very well said. Victor, you've heard what Kevin Sadera has had to say. As a journalist, what new opportunities and technologies have you come across that are changing lives in Africa by creating jobs and helping relieve poverty?
Absolutely. Richard, I'll tell you this. One of the most amazing things, inspiring things, is that this process of poverty eradication in Africa is increasingly driven by innovation. We're seeing things in fintech, for example. We're seeing entire communities that were underserved or even not served at all suddenly having access to the formal economy, mobile money transfer, converting these communities, rural communities. You're seeing people who never had any access to these resources now able to actually save and transact and even be able to borrow securely. We're seeing transformation in agri-tech, for instance, and farmers now have access to things like real-time weather reports, and they have access to mobile or digital extension services, for instance. And all these things improve productivity, and that's good for Africa. That's good for ending poverty. We're also seeing a lot of change in renewable energy, and China is a global leader in not just the manufacturing, but also the use of renewable energy, for instance, solar energy. And we're seeing a lot of that off-grid solar programs transforming lives in rural Africa. It's amazing, Richard, what just consistent, reliable light can do to a society, to a community, to health, to education, and things like that. But tremendously and really important to note is that the biggest change, according to me, from what I've seen across the continent, is in Africa's youth. The median age is about 20. And all these guys, and we're in the middle of a youth bulge in the making. And these guys are an incredible resource. And today, because of technology and because of engagements like this with the People's Republic, we're seeing that Africa is leapfrogging a lot of situations. And Africa is not just receiving aid in order to solve the poverty problem. Africa is generating solutions and generating a way forward. And it's all led by Africa's indefatigable youth.
That's important.
Yeah.
Important point that you've highlighted and illuminated there for us, but we're going to dive a little deeper. We're going to bring Professor Chu Chiang, a fellow of the Belt and Road Research Center at the Minzu University of China. He now joins us live from Beijing. Professor, thank you for joining us here on the program as well. Africa is one of the biggest beneficiaries of the Belt and Road Initiative. Where do you see this relationship going in the next decade or so? And how important is it in overcoming poverty in Africa? What's your take on that?
Well, great question. I think number one, we're going to focus on the top design and also the long-term support, and also as well as for the plannings, matching up. I think China and Africa Cooperation Forum actually elevated the partnership between China and Africa to the full weather comprehensive partnership with shared fate. I think this is a very important toning. And secondly, I think we've promised a long-term support financially and technologically and also human resources wise towards Africa. And also, I think China is matching up its 15th five-year program together with African Union's the agenda of 2063. I think this is very important, responding and answering to the demand of Africa. And also, I think in the future, we're going to focus on very important key areas. I think I agree with my colleagues. Africa never lack of ambitions, but what they need is just an answer and also empowerment. China will continue to focus on the infrastructures, trade, and also agriculture, those traditional cooperation areas. But in the future, we're also going to answer and respond to Africans' ambition in the future. For example, like green energy, green development, like solar and a farm, and also digitalization, e-commerce, AI, and etc. And also, we're going to help them to build up their own capacities, training centers, talent programs, overseas study programs, Luban work studios, and all that will help them to build up the self-reliant power and self-driven forces. Give them the fish, but also teach them how to fish. This is going to be very important to build their own capacity, human resources, and also to build China and Africa cooperation into a demonstration pilot program between South-South cooperation, South-South nations.